Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sharp, St. Andrews class of 68, and welcome to the Rocks and Razorbacks podcast. Here, we feature conversations with remarkable alumni, teachers, and administrators from both Middleton and St. Andrews high schools. This is a great way to share meaningful stories and keep our memories alive of growing up in West Ashland. Now for today's show.
Pamela McMillan graduated from St. Andrews in 1970, and after college returned to teach first at St. Andrews and then some years at Middleton. Ms. McMillan taught many math classes, but I remember her most for Algebra 3 and trigonometry. Buddies Mike Wiggins, Vic Jones, and Andy Gowder were all in that classroom with me. They went on to Ms. McMillan's calculus class, me, probably my job at Wendy's. Now, Ms. McKinney, Neal Kinard and I sat down with her to reflect on attending high school as a Rock and teaching as a Razorback. Thanks for being here.
Delighted.
Great. You know, before we get started, I'm going to read this to you.
Okay.
Okay, because I got a real kick out of this.
Okay.
So this is out of the 1970 St. Andrews yearbook.
Okay.
And it's the senior info at the back of it.
Okay.
And so I might have to rest my voice after I list everything that you were involved in, okay? You were homeroom treasurer. You were on the student council. Chairman of the projects committee, the Glee Club, the junior senior committee, the National Honor Society. You were a representative for the Optimist Youth Week. Okay. Mrs. DAR?
Miss
DAR. There you go. Mu Alpha Theta, a big math organization, great. And then the Miss Pelican contest, it doesn't mention that you won, but we all know you did.
Yes.
And that's earlier in the yearbook, you could find that wonderful picture.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you.
So let's start with your time at St. Andrews as a student. You obviously were so involved in every aspect of it. Give us your thoughts about your time there.
It's wonderful memories. I still have some of those friends. I, like everyone else, have lost some of those friends. So that makes the memories even more dear. We had a wonderful principal in Mr. Hester, and it trickled down throughout the school to the teachers. I'm not sure that I ever had a teacher that I, quote, did not get along with or enjoy. I enjoyed some more than others. We had great football, in my opinion. I had friends that were on the wrestling team. I went to wrestling matches. I enjoyed being in the clubs because it was good for me because I'm, believe it or not, very shy. I'm an introvert. And so for me to become involved in those was a stretch and a learning.
That's a lot of clubs, though.
It is, and different years, I was particularly involved in different clubs. And clubs then were not as involved as they are now. They were simpler. We had a meeting, we had a project, or we had a meeting and we planned a social, or we had a meeting and we went out and helped somebody somewhere.
So did all that help make you who you are?
Absolutely. Absolutely it did, because they were each one a different experience. National Honor Society, obviously, I wasn't the smartest in there, but I was with a lot of smart people, so that made me up my game and try to keep those straight A's. And Mu Alpha Theta, again, the brainy kids with math, but I loved math, so I did that.
Looking back at those Friday nights, what was it like for you on those, especially at the football season, basketball season?
Well, particularly with football, because St. Andrews in 1968, which of course I was in the class of 70, but good football. And we would frequently make the playoffs and the big trip to upstate, but then you went with a parent or a parent took a carload of kids. The kids did not go alone. But it was a pep rallies on Friday afternoon. You could not wait. Either class ended a few minutes early or it was during lunch. Cheerleaders wore their uniforms all day Friday. Sometimes the football players, minus the pads, would wear their jerseys. Yeah. So it brought the whole school together, whether or not somebody was athletic, which I was not. It was unifying. And it was unifying for the parents. I mean, my parents would go to the football game with friends. They'd go out for dinner before, come to the football game. It was like you said, it's a community. And was a wonderful way to grow up.
Where did you get your love for math?
I think, well, I was fortunate in that both of my parents said you might not always make all A's, but you should. But if you don't, just do your best. My mother happened to have been an honor graduate at Shakora High School way back when. And my father, because of his family circumstances, dropped out of school when he was 16. But later got his GED and went to college. And he loved math. One of his favorite professors was the math professor who actually came to our home, so we would sit and chat about trigonometry.
You never really hear that from anybody.
Well, I know. But it was wonderful. So I think the love for math partially was from my parents. And the other thing I liked about it is math, the answer was right or wrong. 2 + 2 is 4 is right. 2 + 2 is 7, that's not right. If you are writing an English paper, you might do all your research, have all the facts right, but perchance your slant or take on it might be different than the person grading it. Same thing with history. You could memorize all those facts, answer the questions, but maybe if you mentioned something, it might not be quite what the teacher was looking for. But math, it was right or wrong.
As long as you keep answering your own math questions, I'll be happy. Okay? So where along the way, was it in high school or beyond, where you decided that I want to make a living teaching math?
I love that question. So as a little bitty child, I always wanted to be a teacher. When I got to high school, I knew that if I taught little people and somebody came that was hungry or didn't come from a good home, I didn't know if my heart could take it, that I would be taking all those children home with me. But I wanted to teach, so I loved history, absolutely loved it. So I decided I'll teach high school history. This will be wonderful. And Louise Smith, who was my math teacher in high school, Dr. Louise Smith, she later left the classroom and worked for the district. And I worked for her, but that's another story. So back to my teaching. Mm-hmm. She said, Pam, I know you're going to college and you want to be a teacher. You need to teach math. I said, Miss Smith, I don't think that's going to happen. I said, I love history so much. And I said, I like math, Miss Smith, and you know I do my homework every night, but I have to study and make sure of everything, and I might have to work 3 or 5 problems like the first one to make sure I understand it. She says, that's why you need to teach math. I said, okay, so explain that to me. She said, we have too many really smart people teaching math, and they don't know how to explain it. She said, so their students are not learning. She said, we need math teachers that know how to work the problem and then explain it, not just look at the problem and give the answer. So I decided, okay, I can do this. So then when I went to college to work on the best odds of getting a job, I majored in secondary education and did a minor in math and a minor in history, so that when I got out and took the teaching exam and then started looking for a job, I would have options.
And that was at the College of Charleston?
Yes, that was at the College of Charleston.
Okay. So in your endeavor to be a teacher, you went on to the Citadel.
Right. So when I was teaching, if every 5 years teachers had to take 6 more credit hours to keep their teaching certificate. And so I looked at this time-wise and financially. Okay, every 5 years I've got to take 6 more hours. It's going to cost this. But then if you got your master's degree, you got a big bump in salary, and you didn't have to take those 6 hours for ages. So I got my master's degree at the Citadel by going to night classes after I taught in the daytime, and then going to other classes in the summer when I was not teaching.
You have a really good work ethic.
Well, my parents, I credit my parents. I mean, my father's family, when you've got 6 children and your husband dies of a fever that in today's world he wouldn't have died of, and you're living off the land, everybody works. And in my mother's family, everybody worked.
So you taught at St. Andrews and Middleton.
I did.
So what was first and how did that happen?
Right. So I taught at St. Andrews High School for 1 year in the fall of graduated College of Charleston in 74, taught in St. Andrews that fall. At that time, to be hired to teach, you interviewed with the district superintendent, and that was the little bitty building in front of St. Andrews High School. It's probably not even there anymore, but at any rate. And so I got a teaching job there. It was shortly before school started. Fortunately, I had a good summer job that would have carried me through the fall, but I would have much preferred teaching. And I taught what at that time was called Algebra 1A and 1B. It was an algebra course where a student might not have the background or ability in math, so they split algebra up into 2 years. You would take half of it 1 year and half the second year. And then I taught what was called general math courses. Then I finished that year, and towards the end of that year, I got a phone call from Edie Gregg, who was head of the math department at Middleton, and said, "I'd like you to come teach at Middleton." And I said, well, let's see, are people going to look at that as I'm going to go from a rock to a razorback? Is that going to look like I'm jumping ship or being disloyal? But at any rate, she said, well, I'll tell you this. If you come and teach at Middleton, what I need is a higher level math teacher. You will be teaching calculus, algebra 3, and trigonometry, and probably some general math. So I thought, well, that's a little bit more expensive. I said, and it's challenging though. I said, I'll come. So, and teachers' contracts are only for 1 year. So there was no contract breaking. I just didn't sign the contract for St. Andrews, and I got one for Middleton. So that's how I got from St. Andrews to Middleton.
When you were at St. Andrews, how old were you?
So I had some students that were close to my age. So let's see, at that time, when I started teaching, I was 22. So yes, everybody can do the math. I was born in 1951.
I think that's one thing that amazes like Neal and myself is the teachers being just barely a little bit older than you are.
Oh, I know.
Back then you think of them as being maybe, I don't want to say much older, but definitely older. They're men and women, and we're just young students. It was just the separation was so little.
I know.
We also love the fact that looking back, the bus drivers were high school students.
Yes, they were. They thought, and there were governors on the buses, so that you could only go X amount of speed, and that was probably a good thing. But yet the bus drivers, I can remember helping friends with their time sheets. They had messed up on the mileage or the time, and that's how they got paid.
Right.
It was interesting.
Right, and I love the
Oh,
pictures.
now I wouldn't. Can you imagine letting your child on a bus with a high school?
My stepbrother was a bus driver up in Greenville, and he used to turn the things that shut the fluid on the windshield wipers out, so as people would come to get on the bus, he could squirt them.
There you go. That's great. Yeah, and not to mention see the pictures of them like posing for the yearbook picture, and they're
Oh, I know. If you look in one of those yearbooks, the bus drivers get a page.
yeah, and some
They
are
get their own-
standing on top of the bus.
Yes,
And yeah, right, different time.
that's right.
But
That's
maybe-
right. And
maybe-
some of them parked their buses in their front yards. Some of them went to the bus lot. I mean,
I've heard good stories, between Jim Atkinson or Bob Olson about
yes,
bus drivers and they're kids, but they're doing the right thing.
yeah,
Somebody got on the wrong bus, helping them out, taking them where they need to go, being very, very kind.
yeah.
If there's a problem, actually stopping and talking to the parent.
That's right.
Yeah, so wow, that's incredible. So you graduated from St. Andrews in 70,
Right.
and I guess was it the next year, Middleton forms, you go on to college.
I go on to college.
Okay,
All
but
right.
any thoughts about, wow, folks having to divide up like that and then create a whole new high school?
I think they handled it so well and promoted Middleton. I mean, for example, they connected the Arkansas Razorback cheerleaders with the Middleton cheerleaders to teach them Razorback cheers. I mean, they just handled it really well.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
I'm sure there were some people that were bothered. Change is hard, no matter what the change is. But they made the new school exciting, the idea of it.
Right.
And of course, the people that stayed at St. Andrews, I mean, it had so much history, people didn't mind staying.
And then years later, of course, they all combined.
I prefer, I don't know, this won't be popular, I prefer smaller schools. I liked the idea of being able to walk down the hall and call a student's name. I think it's good for community, like we've referenced several times, and it's also good for discipline. If I can call your name when you're walking down the hall, you're less likely to do something because I'll write you up, right? If I know your name. If I don't know your name and you're doing something, it's going to be more of a challenge. So I just thought, what are they thinking? But it has turned, it's a phenomenal school. I mean, and the career center there is wonderful. Dr. Brack, who's the principal now, obviously has been through several principals. You've interviewed one. But they have really held it to a high standard. It has challenges, but every high school has challenges in today's world.
He was very supportive of the documentary, so we're very excited.
Oh,
And got to
good.
meet him. Yeah, absolutely. We'll get him on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I know if you called my name with that accent, I would know who's calling my name.
I know.
Yeah. You told me off camera where it came from. Can you tell us right now?
The accent?
Uh-huh.
Well, probably from my Mississippi mother. I was born in Charleston, but if you don't have Charleston roots, you don't get the brogue. So I grew up hearing the Mississippi accent and it just stuck. I have tried to tone it down, but it just hasn't worked.
That's one of the things I'm sure people would love to hear. So when you told me, I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
gotta get you on camera.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not a Charleston accent. It really confuses people when they find out that I was born here but don't talk here.
Why is Middleton and why is St. Andrews both regarded, I think, as really successful schools. What made them special and turn out some really, really quality, amazing alumni?
Well, I think it goes back to your first mention of community, families, new families. And if this family heard something about somebody else's child, they would let the other parent know. And so everybody, it's like I told our girls growing up, just remember wherever you go, somebody's going to know me or your father. And we will hear about it. Now, that probably wasn't 100%, but it was community. And I think part of the reason their reputations were so good is sports. You know, they had good track records. Their music programs at both schools were outstanding. Their high school graduates went to good colleges. You didn't hear a lot of bad press. You know, I don't know that I can even remember, quote, school fights. There might have been one a year, but then it'd be the first and last. Because the faculty and staff would say no, and the parents would say no. Good communication.
Were you always in the same classroom when you were teaching at Middleton? Did you move around?
No, that was another story. So when I was in that school building, there was no air conditioning. So the first year, you remember,
Oh, yeah.
the first year that I was there, classes were not grouped by department. It would be like the 9th grade classes were on this hall, the 10th grade classes were on this hall, 11th, etc. So the very first year I taught, I started off in what I would call a little cubby hole. And actually, if you remember it, it was second floor on a corner, and it became the out-of-school suspension room. So that tells you how tiny it was. They had more students sign up for the math course than they thought they would have. And it was miserable. It's like we could not breathe. So Ms. Gregg and I, with Mr. German, who was the principal at the time, had a chat that you just can't squeeze this many bodies in that room and us have success. So I moved to a downstairs room, which was great. And then I think I remember after that they decided to group all the math courses in one hall, all the English in one spot, so I moved again. But there wasn't much to move. It's what was in my desk. We had to clear everything out the end of school year every year.
Right. Yeah, air conditioning is unfortunately part of the legacy.
It is. It is. I can remember teaching and just sweat. I thought, I'm not going to make it. But I saved money. I bought 2 box fans for my classroom. Mm-hmm. I have one at this angle, one at that angle, so we could get somewhat of a cross breeze. I had a policy with my students that you have to sit in your assigned seat till I learn everybody's name. Once I've learned everybody's name, which I could usually do within a week, 150 students, you may sit where you'd like as long as you behave and pay attention. That was the rule.
Great. I don't think I moved around in your class.
Yeah. Well, people usually decided a certain spot they liked with their friends, and people hardly moved around.
But for me, if I did well on a test, that's my lucky desk.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the good thing about Middleton, I'm sure it's any school, the good camaraderie between faculty. So at one point, they started, this is going to sound so meager, but teachers, you could bring your lunch or you could eat what the kids were eating. Well, all of a sudden they decided to chef salads. This is when chef salads came in. And so Debbie McConnell and I would go over there and get the chef's salad, and we would look at what Rusty and Jim Warden had. And I looked at the lunchroom lady and I said, we're both paying the same thing. His chef salad is a lot bigger than my chef salad. She said, well, he's going to eat more. I said, well, then cut my price.
That's right.
You know? And so it was
And
always,
back then it was probably like
it was
two and
always
half-
a chef salad
$2.50.
joke between us and the coaches.
Yeah. I think it was Rusty Davis who was talking about, that building was made for a junior high.
Right.
And, the thought of seeing it go down, he said it's time. It's time. So if you were standing in the parking lot and seeing that bulldozer come up and start knocking the old Middleton's building down, what do you think your thoughts would be?
I think I would first of all think of the memories that had been made there, and focus on the memories that will be made when there's a new school there. And like the fact that it's staying school property. I think that's special.
Thanks for watching today's episode, and be on the lookout for additional episodes. If you'd like to be a guest or even a host in the Rocks and Razorbacks podcast, please let us know. We want the podcast to be the go-to place for cherished Middleton and St. Andrews memories. Don't forget, the Rocks and Razorbacks documentary geared for South Carolina ETV is in production, and we'd love your input and help with that as well. For now, go Rocks and, go Hogs. Well, you get it. Thanks.